Hello there everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games, and today I want to talk about the controversial Breath of the Wild-fication of 2D Zelda. This has been a hot topic ever since we saw Echoes of Wisdom, and especially following that most recent trailer that introduced the bind mechanic, where a lot of Zelda fans are a little upset that they basically took Breath of the Wild's mechanics and put it into a 2D game. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit today. Of course, if you are new here and you enjoy Nintendo Switch discussions like this each and every day, I would appreciate you subscribing. Let's get into it. Alright, so what am I talking about when I say the Breath of the Wild-fication of 2D Zelda? So, for those out of the loop, a lot of Zelda fans have been upset at the direction Zelda has taken. Now, it is undeniable that people love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. They are the best-selling games in the franchise. I'm not going to make any argument here that people don't like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. However, I guess it's maybe like a vocal minority of people, I'll say at this point, that really are not a big fan of the open-air, open-ended puzzle design of these modern Zelda games. And when there were rumors and people were talking about the potential of a new 2D Zelda game, there was a lot of hope, I think, from that subset of people that we would be getting a more traditional Zelda game. Okay, Nintendo, if Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and I assume the next 3D Zelda game are going to be these open-air games, at least give us a 2D Zelda game that is more traditional dungeons, more logical puzzle solving instead of the open-ended design, right? But that's not what we're getting. If you've watched the trailers for Echoes of Wisdom, it is very clear that Nintendo took what happened with Breath of the Wild, which is the amazing open-air, open-world design of this game, where you can kind of solve puzzles in multiple different ways. They took that and applied it to a 2D game. Now, I will say, for myself personally, I'm extremely excited for Echoes of Wisdom. I think this game looks great, and I'm excited that they're trying to do that in a 2D setting. I'm curious to see how this will all play out. However, I think I understand. I understand the fear and a little bit of the frustration from a lot of Zelda fans when they say they didn't want this. And if the next 2D Zelda game is also like this, then sure, I think there's a kind of a reason to complain a little bit if you're more of a fan of the traditional Zelda games we used to get. But for me, I look at Echoes of Wisdom, I'm super excited for this game. It's a fresh take on 2D Zelda, which, you know, I love 2D Zelda. A lot of the time, I actually prefer the 2D games, Minish Cap, A Link Between Worlds, Link's Awakening. Like, these are some of my favorite games of all time. And while I would have loved if we just got another 2D Zelda game where you play as Link and you have a sword and it's just kind of, you know, what you expect from a 2D Zelda game, linear puzzle solving. While I would have liked that, I'm completely fine with them doing this. Now, like I said, if they do it again, and, you know, if this game doesn't work out and people are upset, then yeah, if they keep doing this over and over, I totally get it. I know there is a vocal part of the Zelda fandom that prefer the old games, and a new 2D game in theory should have been safe from the Breath of the Wild-fication of the franchise. So I get why you could look at Echoes of Wisdom and be a little disappointed, but for me, man, I'm just looking at this game and I'm like, this looks so freaking good. If you remember back in, I want to say, I'm not sure what GDC it was, but it was after Breath of the Wild came out, they showed the 2D prototype for that game, and, you know, it was Breath of the Wild, basically in Zelda 1, in a Zelda 1 NES art style, where they showed Link kind of climbing on trees and burning trees and just completely breaking the game in a 2D environment. While I can understand not wanting that, I personally am looking at this game and I'm just like, wow, I love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom so much. I can't wait to see how they adapt that into a 2D setting. Seeing Zelda hopping on top of trees and just breaking this game in a 2D setting, in a 2D context, I think is very interesting. So while, yes, I would have been very happy with a traditional 2D Zelda game, I'd be lying if I said I'm disappointed by this game in any way, shape, or form. I think this looks fantastic, and it's, you know, I'm not going to say it's necessarily a fresh take on Zelda, but it is a fresh take on 2D Zelda, and seeing how they're going to implement all these mechanics. I mean, this game has, like, proper side quests now. It even has the, like, the same kind of text font and, like, bubble above characters' heads when you're talking to them, which is interesting to me, because, like, that's just funny that they are even reusing that asset a little bit. But, you know, we're seeing you have a horse in this game. I believe that's the first time you've ever had a horse in a 2D Zelda game. I'm pretty sure. We're seeing, you know, the little potion shop in this game where you get status effects very similar to the food and kind of cooking for Breath of the Wild. We're seeing all of these crazy mechanics where you can clone enemies and items and then reuse them to your advantage. That is taking such a great page out of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's book and just kind of adapting it to a 2D Zelda game that I'm really excited to see how this game plays out. Maybe it'll come out and it won't be as good as a lot of the other 2D Zelda games that we've had in the past, but I would be surprised if that's the case, at least for me personally, because I do love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom so much. Those are my favorite Zelda games, even though I grew up with, Ocarina and Twilight Princess and Wind Waker and, Skyward Sword I enjoy as well. I think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, puzzle solving, specifically that aspect, the puzzle solving aspect of these recent 3D Zelda games has been better than any other game in the franchise, which does come with its downsides, right? Because that open-ended design of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom kind of bogs down some other aspects, I think, for a lot of people, specifically the dungeons, right? Maybe even the story in some ways. But from everything we've seen of Echoes of Wisdom, I don't know if it's going to share those same issues. The dungeons, from what we've seen, look really cool. The Dark World segments seem interesting, and just playing I don't know, this game just looks good, is what I'm trying to say. So while I understand if you're not a fan of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, like, I get it. I get being tired of this current phase Zelda is in, especially when you consider, I mean, this is a reused engine and assets, right? We're not even getting a new art style for a 2D Zelda game. They're just using the Link's Awakening remake art style. So, like, I totally get it if you're kind of tired of where Zelda is at right now, but at the same time, it's like, man, this game just looks so good. I cannot be disappointed when a game looks this good. Being able to copy or clone basically any enemy and then binding them to yourself so that you can, like, let's say you're binding yourself to a bird and it kind of takes you over a gap in a dungeon or something. Like, there's just so many interesting ways that they can use this mechanic in a 2D game that, like, even if it is open-ended, I don't really think it's going to be as open as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Like, those games are, 3D. There's literally just simply way more going on. With a 2D game, yeah, you might be able to stack beds, but, like, I don't know. Like, are you really going to be able to completely break this game like you break Breath of the Wild? I mean, I think to a certain extent, maybe, but I don't think it's going to be as extreme as those games. But even as someone who really likes the open-ended puzzle solving of the recent Zelda games, I will say, like, I was expecting 2D Zelda to kind of be the outlet for Nintendo to not do that. To be honest, like, that's what I expected from the next 2D Zelda game, and I hope down the line we do get something like that. I think it's unlikely they ever make another 3D Zelda game that's not like Breath of the Wild. I think they'll do some remakes and stuff, and of course ports and remasters, but with how well Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom sold, I'd be surprised if they ever make another game like Ocarina of Time, like, just from scratch. I really don't think that's that likely. I've talked about this plenty over the years, but I do think if we're going to continue the open air design for 3D Zelda in terms of the new games, and especially now if we're adding open air design to the 2D games, Nintendo's probably going to go pretty, I would say, in-depth when it comes to remaking some of those fan-favorite 3D Zelda games. I'm specifically talking about Ocarina, Majora, and I even think Twilight Princess at some point down the road could receive full remakes, because they're not going to be as resource-intensive as a new game. Like, Aonuma will probably produce it, right? He'll be overseeing it, but, like, he's not going to be designing a remake of Ocarina or, Twilight Princess, right? But those are games that fans will want. You'll get your fill of a traditional 3D Zelda. And hey, maybe if you are a fan of these games more than the recent stuff, maybe if those remakes sell really well, Nintendo will look at that and think, well, maybe we should go back and try making a traditional 3D Zelda game. But when you look at how well Skyward Sword HD sold on Switch, it's like, I'm sure Nintendo had bigger expectations for that game. It sold better than the Wii version, which is great, but it only sold like 3.5 million copies after Breath of the Wild. That probably was kind of disappointing for them, and a sign in general that, while maybe you don't want to hear this if you're a traditional Zelda fan, the reality is most of the Zelda fandom at this point are Breath of the Wild fans that potentially haven't even played Ocarina of Time, as sad as that is to say, and as old as that makes me feel to say. So maybe if we get this Ocarina of Time remake or something, maybe that could rejuvenate the idea of a traditional 3D Zelda game, assuming it sells very well, which I think it probably would, because it's Ocarina. So barring that, I do hope we get just a traditional Zelda game later down the line. But, this is our first time trying an open-air 2D Zelda game. We have, probably 10 2D Zelda games that are all the same in concept, right? And in general structure, where you're playing as Link with a sword and you're just doing basic puzzles. We have a lot of those games already. It's time for this new era to kind of take its shape and really solidify itself as a significant part of the Zelda franchise. But I will say, give us 10 years from now, maybe not the next 2D Zelda game, but the one after that, give us something a little bit more traditional. I would like to see that eventually and kind of have these two design philosophies coexist. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Where do you stand on Echoes of Wisdom? Are you excited that they're taking a lot of the design philosophies of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and kind of putting them into a 2D setting? Or are you disappointed and wanted a more traditional 2D Zelda game experience? I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm actually going hands-on with this game very soon during PAX West, so I'll have a video going over my impressions of the game with my hands-on time next week or very soon. So definitely subscribe and stay tuned for that. I'm really excited to go hands-on with this game. And also, I'll be playing Mario Party Jamboree there as well, which is going to be a great time. So definitely subscribe for those videos coming up in the very near future. But yeah, give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch news, reviews, coverage, all of that fun stuff. Check out my Twitter at BoTalksGames. Check out my new channel at It's Amiibo for a lot more like collecting type content. And until next time, folks, peace.